We're back. Thank you for finding us again. No Stoplights. I want to thank our sponsors before we even get into kind of the weirdness of the backdrop or the difference of the backdrop for those that have been kind enough to subscribe and follow us and participate in some of these podcasts. You know, the backdrop was fundamentally different than it is today. I'll explain that in just a couple of minutes. We are a work in progress, mind you. I want to thank our sponsors, and I mean that very sincerely. We are in our new studio. It's obviously not a complete studio. That's why we've been away for a couple of weeks. We have been moving from a piece of property that we were borrowing from a good friend of ours. I tell my friend Dave Becker, we were living out of a suitcase for the last year because we really didn't know where we were headed. We think we have some clarity now about what our objectives are, kind of what our modus operandi will be, and what we hope to accomplish in the year 2025. Got about 6 weeks left in this year. We're still transitioning into our new space. So I want to thank our sponsors for their patience, their continued support, and helping us see through this evolution of a podcast that we hope eventually turns into, you ready? A multifaceted media empire. That's quite the overstatement. I want to begin by thanking Victor's. Tim Norwood of Victor's has been kind and gracious beyond belief for what we're trying to do here. In fact, we are actually in a property that Tim owns now. We're leasing some space permanently from Tim. He was very gracious, very kind, very supportive in allowing us to kind of move in this studio, and we got some ancillary space so we can really run this multifaceted media empire that we're in the process of building. But none of that would have been possible without Victor's and Tim Norwood. Victor's is a sponsor, and that's the company that he wishes to promote. But a lot of this was Tim personally really investing, believing in. I don't know if it's necessarily Dave Baker and I as much as it is our attempt to create some sort of connection with our community, media related. So Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, they have been just gone above and beyond. And I've said this before, when I got into radio, the one company that I wanted to have a relationship with was MPD Electric Co-op, because I knew how big an ambassador they were for this community. I knew in my political life how important energy would be as South Carolina continued to grow residentially and commercially. And I am most grateful and thankful and appreciative for MPD Electric Co-op, kind of helping us see this thing through to where we are and where I think we'll be in the next 5 or 6 weeks. Francis Marion University, full disclosure, the space we were borrowing was in a property owned by Francis Marion University. They have been unbelievably steadfast in their commitment to no stoplights and what we're trying to do here, once again, as we evolve into a not just a podcast, but I'll make some, I'll provide some clarity here in just a bit. Carolina Bank, they've got the money, and without the money, this equipment could have never been purchased. They have been unbelievably gracious, unbelievably supportive in what we're trying to do here. So, one of the great local banks and businesses, of our community, Carolina Bank, has stepped up and really been on board with what we're trying to do. Pepsi of Florence, you can't tell it, but there's Diet Pepsi in this cup, and they have been everything and more in their willingness to help us try to do what it is we think we're on the cusp of accomplishing. Micky Fins, another great local business. Rick Havacost has been there for us through thick and thin, time and time again. Thank you very much to Rick and Micky Fins. And that's not Pepsi if we weren't doing a podcast. We may do one drunk one of these days. That may be a lot of fun to do. And it's podcasting, not terrestrial radio, so you can take liberties with the Queen's English on podcasting that you can't when you're doing it in terrestrial radio. McCall Farms, they have been with, I go back to my political days and how supportive the Swink family were, and McCall Farms has been to anything I've ever tried to do. Thank you. And I mean that sincerely. Thank you to all the Swinks, all the employees, all the associates at McCall Farms. They have been steadfastly supportive of what we're trying to do here. And I want to make clear, and I'll provide a little more clarity after I thank our sponsors, PLC Commercial Real Estate. We've done several podcasts as we kind of adjusted and adapted from a series of podcasts we did with business leaders. We've done some with local businesses, PLC Commercial Real Estate. There are a lot of friends of mine over there. I made kind of a pitch to them about what I wanted to do. They came on board. Thank you to PLC Commercial Real Estate. And lastly, the person that, or the group of people that came on board most recently has been our Florence County Legislative Delegation. We've got a lot of things in store for this podcast. Once the General Assembly gets in session in January, we will have regular updates from delegation members about what's happening in Columbia. Where do they stand on this? This is not a partisan podcast. I am an unapologetic Republican. I don't make any bones about that. I am, for lack of a better description, Trump to the bone. I am an America firster. I believe in political disruption. I think the moment is unique in American political history. But a lot of our legislative delegations are Democrats. They know that I'm going to give them a fair shake. They know that I'm not going to try and ambush a Democrat when they come on here and we have conversations and updates about where the state is, where we're headed legislatively. And so I am proud that the Florence County Legislative Delegation have agreed to be a sponsor and a part of this podcast. So I want to go back to the beginning. In the beginning, Dave Baker and I had this kind of an idea. And we realized, or it appeared to us, that the PD region of South Carolina had kind of become a bit segregated. And by that I mean we had the PD, and then you had the Grand Strand. And the Grand Strand became a kind of a monster in its own. I mean, it is what it is, but we started looking around at some of the issues that we felt were lacking as we want to make sure we don't slip to a third tier community. I mean, I don't think we're second tier, and I'm talking about Florence and the greater PD region, but one of the things that we have to maintain is some focus on our local economy, some focus on our local business, some focus on our local politics. And I went visiting all of these businesses and told them what my intent was. And I told them you got to be patient because, it took us 12 years to build a big market share and an audience on radio. And we have been very successful in radio. We have been moderately successful at this, but we've not had clarity. We've really not understood the nature of what we're trying to do. I don't have any formal training in media at all. Dave Baker has a lot of training in radio, but we accepted that there were going to be some growing pains, and we requested of our sponsors to be patient with us because we don't have complete clarity. When I sat down with sponsors and try to convince them to be a part of this, I never misled a single one saying, hey, I know by the end of the third quarter in 2024, we'll be here. And by the end of the fourth quarter, we'll be there. And by the beginning of the the first quarter of 2025. But I wanted them to know how committed I am to making sure that we are not a news desert. I applaud the Post and Courier. I applaud the Morning News. I applaud, to some degree, some of the covers the local networks give us. I'll call a name, Tanya Brown. I think does a hell of a job in covering the PD region, but I want to be more in depth. I mean, I really want to get to the kind of the nuts and bolts of local government. What's wrong with the city's water situation? And I don't want it to be speculation and Facebook posts and Twitter and whatnot. I want to have reasonable but aggressive conversations with community leaders about what we're doing, why we're doing it, and how can we do better. And none of that would have been possible without these sponsors. And we are, as you can tell, in kind of a bare room. We've got it temporarily set up. We've got a great engineer that travels a lot. He'll be back by the end of this week, and we hope to have this room kind of settled by the next time we look at the camera. We hope it'll be fully furnished. It'll be a real live podcast studio. We've got an ancillary space that we're going to try to operate and do some maybe some newsletters, maybe some social media posts. And all of it will be, not all of it, but a lot of it will be local intensive. Obviously, this is the first podcast we've done since the presidential election. I've got a lot of notes here about energy dominance and mass deportation, how much of this is going to be policy and how much of this is going to be retribution. We're going to do another podcast before the end of the week, but I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of welcome you back or at least reintroduce ourselves into your world, let you understand that we have been living out of a suitcase. We're not living out of a suitcase any longer. We have a permanent residence. And once again, I want to thank Tim Norwood for agreeing to kind of accept us into the building of which he owns. And where we go from here, there is some pretty good clarity here. We're negotiating with another media company as we speak about a much larger announcement. Our sponsors are well aware of what we think will happen first quarter of next year. But in essence, I wanted to take this opportunity to look in the camera, to tell you how much these sponsors have done for us, but to tell you that we have a plan. The plan moving forward is to hopefully provide a more in-depth news, conversation, podcasting service to our local community. And we may do one on the local issues. We may do one on the national issues, but we've kind of had to bob and weave at the mercy of, once again, living out of a suitcase. We didn't have total autonomy of the previous space. We have control over this space, and we're going to get real busy, probably doing more podcasts than we have normally done, newsletters, social media posts. We have a pretty good idea of what we want to do and where we're headed, but I wanted to tell you that we know we've been gone for a couple of weeks. I don't know if you missed us or not. I'd like to believe you did, but in essence, this is kind of a relaunch of No Stoplights in our own separate space in downtown Florence. And we're going to do a podcast probably in the next day or so that'll kind of revisit the presidential election. We talked a lot about leading up to the presidential campaign, what I thought was going to happen. I'm going to look through the window at Dave Baker and say, told you. He accused me of being overly confident because I'm not normally, I'm the most paranoid, naysayer you could imagine. I'm always trying to find, I'll give you a quick story. One of my sons one day said, Dad, do you wake up every day imagining that everything in the world's going wrong? I said, yeah, pretty much I do. I don't expect everything to go wrong, but I certainly wake up every day imagining that everything's going wrong. But this is the first time we have spoken to you on the podcast about the presidential election. I think I went through with the whiteboard, if you'll remember. We'll have that back. We'll bring that back. But the whiteboard, I went through about 6 or 7 data points that were, to me, empirical and led kind of me down the road of a certain degree or a small level of certainty as to why Donald Trump was going to win. And I want to do a podcast exclusively and specifically about the 24 presidential election. Many of you are happy. Some of you are not so happy. South Carolina's a +9 state. The majority of our subscribers and viewers are South Carolinians. So odds are you were a Trump supporter and not a Harris supporter. And I believe that there is a chance. We know that Donald Trump ran on being a political disruptor. We know that he's made appointments, waiting on confirmation. Some may get confirmed, some may not. I don't know. I'm not in the Senate. I did read today that J.D. Vance is going to kind of make the loop around fellow senators. He's still a junior senator from Ohio, and J.D. Vance is going to make the rounds with Matt Gaetz, with RFK Jr., with Tulsi Gabbard, and try to gain some favor. There's no doubt it's controversial, but this is what America asked for. We asked for a kind of a reboot of our American government. I went back and looked at some of the things, policy and retribution. I've talked a lot about that. I understand that Donald Trump wants some retribution. I understand an eye for an eye. I understand what they're doing to you, doing to them. I understand that politics is a nasty, zero-sum game. But I'd like to see us focus more on policy. I guess there's a place for retribution. And I'll go on the record and say I am very comfortable in seeking retribution from anyone who weaponized the government. I mean, that's kind of my line in the sand. That's my line of demarcation. I mean, if you said Trump's a sorry, no-count son of a gun, if you called him Hitler, so be it. I mean, that's the nastiness of American politics and political campaigns. But if you are someone who took action in weaponizing the government against Donald Trump or some of his cadre, his cabal of supporters, then shame on you, and justice should seek you out. So you've got a fork in the road, as Yogi Bear famously said, take it. I think they will probably seek to some degree retribution. I hope it's not trying to settle political scores, but rather honestly trying to understand with a high degree of clarity who is responsible for weaponizing government, and let's make damn sure those people pay price enough that nobody ever does it again. Because folks, people with a political motivation that have the power to indict someone of a crime is one of the most dangerous threats to American democracy or any free people. You just can't have that. And we believe, or I do, I can't say we, can't certainly speak for you. I believe there were certain individuals within the DOJ that intentionally weaponized the government, and they need to be held accountable. To the policy side, we talked about Marlboro PD Electric Co-op. I want to get somebody from Marlboro PD Electric Co-op to come on and talk about energy dominance. Trump made a big part of his campaign, immigration, inflation, crime, and the economy. Well, the economy is predicated on energy. Energy is going to be. I mean, if someone said, Ken, if you were running for office today, what are the two central issues you would pay most attention to? It would be energy and debt. But it would be trying to create as much energy, and it doesn't matter if we're making more energy than we ever had. Are we making all we can? How do we make it more affordable? How do we help Marlboro PD Electric Co-op cut through the red tape and bureaucracies that make it complicated and difficult to provide you with affordable energy? So energy and debt would be two things that I would be specifically aware of. I would have my ACE team, working day and night on those particular issues. And the other is decoupling from China. The Trump phenomenon brought about some very different personalities. A lot of you that listen to me on the radio and have watched a podcast or two know that I'm somewhat of a Peter Thiel disciple, and I would agree that Thiel cuts both ways. I mean, he's a unique guy. He's a gay Silicon Valley billionaire that, along with Elon Musk, co-founded PayPal. He had blank Q money very early in life, but one of his political motivations and one of his, I don't want to call him a one-trick pony, but he is kind of sort of that. He is obsessed with decoupling from China. And now Trump has taken a non-conventional route in how to deal with China and their competitiveness and the fact that they want to be the preeminent superpower on the planet. Guys, China does not want to coexist with America as a superpower duopoly. I mean, they genuinely want to be the lone and sole superpower on the planet. And Peter Thiel believes that the sooner we try to effectively decouple from China, by that I mean not become as dependent on some of the manufacturing realities. We found out during COVID how little we make here. I mean, we've kind of we've transitioned into a service economy. I like it better when we make stuff. And in 2001, by allowing China into the World Trade Organization, to me, we granted them permission to become the world's manufacturing plant. And I think America's paid a price as a result of that. I think decoupling from China includes tariffs. I think it includes onshoring manufacturing. I think it requires tax incentives and credits to create better and more profitable opportunities for corporations to come to America and make widgets. And Teal has been very much in the Trump camp when it comes to a change of ideology regarding China. The other that I think is the macro of all macros is right-sizing government. Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk don't hold office. I think Vivek was the youngest candidate ever seeking the presidency in the history of the United States. Don't hold me to that, but I think I'm right when I say that. Elon's got more money than anybody. He's real smart and a little bit crazy, and I've learned in my political life, that's a dangerous recipe. When you're blank you rich, you're really, really bright, you're fearless, and you're a little bit crazy. And I say that in a very complimentary fashion. I mean, the guy wants to colonize Mars. How can he not be a little bit crazy when you want to colonize Mars? But Trump has put them in charge of what they're referring to as a Department of Government Efficiency. I don't have any idea how fat government is, but it's fat. I don't have any idea how much government wastes, but it wastes a ass. I don't know how fraud and abuse and just misbilling and not knowing where the money goes. I know the Pentagon, which is about $1 trillion a year budget, about $900 billion. I mean, they can't pass an audit and have passed one in 7 or 8 years. That's basically saying we don't really know where the money's going. I mean, it's an ass of money. It's $900 billion. And we think we know where a lot of it goes, but we're not real sure where all of it goes. Well, Trump has tasked Elon Musk, entrepreneur extraordinaire, Vivek Ramaswamy, a very well-spoken and articulate libertarian-leaning Republican, to basically right-size government. And I said on the radio one morning, and I know I'm right here, downsizing government, I mean, you start downsizing government, you're going to mess with my Social Security. You're going to kind of monkey around with Medicare, and we may cut transportation spending, and the next thing you know, our kids can't get educated. I mean, I think all that is not to be concerned with, but I get it. I mean, I understand when someone from a conservative perspective says downsize, a lot of people hear cuts. So what they're going to say is we're going to right size government. What is the right size of the federal government? Don't know. Don't have any idea. Something tells me it's much smaller than $7 trillion annually. Something tells me it's much smaller than 2 million employees. When we saw Virginia, and I had buddies of mine texting me, they think I know more about this than I really do because I'm good at convincing people that I know things that I don't really know. But my buddies were texting me, hell, he's going to win Virginia. I said the bureaucrats hadn't voted yet. In Northern Virginia, they're late to return. And if Trump's up 4 or 5 in Virginia, it looks like he's going to win there. This will be a Reagan-like landslide. Okay, wait till the public servants vote. And the government workers began voting, and they, I think, 80-20 in support of the candidate not named Donald Trump. And a lot of that is self-preservation, and I get it. But the American people can't be asked to continue to send trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to Washington, D.C. in the name of running a federal government when they don't know where the money goes. Is it enough? Is it too much? And Elon and Vivek are going to be responsible for that. That is the macro of all macros. If my kids are going to have the same or better opportunities than I, if my grandkids are going to have the same or better opportunities than I, we've got to get our spending under control. I mean, that's imperative. There's no negotiating. We can argue about what to cut and where to cut, and do we raise revenue while we're cutting. That is a fair debate. That is a philosophical debate. Conservatives and liberals have been debating that since the beginning of the American government. But we have to do something about our situation regarding debt. That is non-negotiable. That has to happen, and I am inspired. And I didn't say happy. I am inspired that 2 people as smart as Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are going to lead the charge in finding out the best way to right-size government. If you're a bureaucrat, you're probably not sleeping as well at night. It's your damn problem, not mine. I read this morning, 85% of bureaucrats aren't going to Washington every day. They're working remotely. There's a set of rules for thee, and a set of rules for me, and I find that deeply offensive. So we're going to do a podcast probably in the next day or two that I'll kind of break down some of the nominations or some of the nominees, what I think the chances for confirmation are. Is Gates a head fake or a dare? By that I mean, is Gates such a radical ask of the United States Senate, some of the Republicans in the Senate, that it makes RFK Jr. look tame. It makes Tulsi Gabbard look tame. It makes Pete Hegseth look tame. I don't know. Trump didn't call me before he appointed or asked Matt Gaetz to serve as Attorney General, or is it a dare? And by that I mean, is Donald Trump trying to find out on the front end what he really never found out in 2016, and that's who's with me? We elected Donald Trump to be a change agent. We didn't elect him to go along and get along. That freaks some people out. That's your problem, not mine. But I think Matt Gaetz is either a head fake or a dare. And by the dare, I mean, I'm going to ask for a vote. I'm not going to remove him from consideration. If he doesn't have the votes, you'll vote him down. But I want to know who is willing and fully committed to trying to change and overhaul government as we speak. So once again, I want to thank you for tolerating our being gone for a couple of weeks. I want to thank our sponsors once again: Victor's, MPD Electric Co-op, Francis Marion University, Carolina Bank, Pepsi of Florence, Micky McCall Farms, PLC Commercial Real Estate, and our latest edition, Florence County Legislative Delegation. I'm excited about what we're trying to do here. It will not just be a podcast. I have been commanded by someone we hired to write a newsletter once a week on a kind of a topical matter, maybe local. And I have no interest. And I want to say this from the get-go. I'm not a journalist, but it's time somebody spoke truth to power in our community. It's time someone held our local governments accountable. And by that, I mean city, county, and school boards. I'm not saying that there's shenanigans going on. We don't know. I mean, we honestly don't know if the school board is doing a good job, if the county council is doing a good job, if the city council is doing a good job, if the delegation is doing a good job. But we're going to be your eyes and ears. We're going to have constant, consistent communication with leaders of our area. And there's no interest in ambushing. This isn't 60 Minutes. This is not a gotcha episode. We're not looking for clicks. We're not looking for, more views, the better. But we're going to have a lot of podcasts about local issues. We're going to have some podcasts about national issues. We're going to have some podcasts about state issues. We're going to have some podcasts about college football. We'll have some podcasts about racing. We'll have a lot of different sorts of podcasts, but I'm excited and enthusiastic that in a community where the media seems to be in decline, we are kind of on the upward trajectory. I hope to partner with an existing media interest here in town. We've had some conversations. I'm a little bit more controversial and outspoken than they're accustomed to, but I love this community, and I know these sponsors love this community, and we're now in our own dwelling. I mean, this is our space. We can make with it what we choose to. When we talk to you again, the walls behind me will probably look a little bit different. I apologize for the 2 weeks we didn't have a podcast, but we're in our space now, and we can do as we please now. And we're going to go guns a-blazing, trying to provide the best product we know how. Thank you.